Do you now believe in God? Now? Difficult to answer. I know. I don't need to believe. I know.
I used to once dream about a place like this. A place where you would quickly get lost, a labyrinthine kind of empty ancient city. And I would come back to this place, and you would enter buildings, you could enter sewers, and that would lead you to another dream. And this would be something like a transition place, a lobby place for different dreams. And it seems like there's something to the unconscious being structured like a big, confusing labyrinthine structure, like a building or a city. And as a lot of kind of mysterious, mystic traditions revolve around the ancient city of Jerusalem, it's not surprising to see Jerusalem to be kind of like that. Now, the work with dreams is to try and create a sort of map, a sort of topography of the unconscious in a way. This is actually the title of a book by Stanislav Grof as well, called The Topography of the Unconscious. And in that he researched the application of LSD, psychedelic drugs, with psychotherapeutic patients. What he found was that you could enter kind of deep traumatic networks, so-called coex systems in the unconscious that were formed because of some sort of intense emotional experiences that created consistent complexes in which you could regress using the psychedelic drug in order to find it. But the work is quite complicated, as you need to kind of find your way around a structure like this, more or less. Now, what methods are there to explore these things? One of which is, of course, keeping a dream journal of sorts. One that can lead you to the places you want to revisit, find the connections between them, find the commonalities between them, as they need to be connected by analogy. They're not necessarily persistent. So the geometry of a dream space is not necessarily consistent or Euclidean. In that sense, there's no absolute space. If you go back the way you came, the place you end up at may be very different. Very different from where you began. Now, this can be also seen in these kind of image-generating artificial intelligence networks, where if you kind of go back to the settings you had in the beginning, you get a different image, as they seem to be incapable of proper permanence of objects, registering proper permanence of objects, permanence of spaces, unless the spaces were pre-given to them. And that's where you get these kind of ideas of deep dream, of dreaming machines. So in a sense, the machines are a sort of a representation of the unconscious, a representation of the unconscious of humans, and a kind of collective structure that represents us, and that can be found in our language as well. So you could say large language models, as they're developing, are a form of implicit representation of our unconscious, as they're just as entangled and confusing as a labyrinth is. So this kind of work with the unconscious difficult to grasp, as you don't want to make the mistake and feel like the unconscious is some sort of other world, some spirit world, though it can be perceived as such, of course, especially in mythological, mystical descriptions. Now, one also could conceptualize it as a kind of bodily structure. So the body works kind of according to different principles than rational decision making. You don't think about beating your heart, you don't think about digesting. So a lot of psychic processes are also autonomous in a way, and that gives rise to the structure of the unconscious. Another way to think about it is philosophically, that there is this sort of ontological sense of nothingness, the ontological sense of the unknownness, undisclosedness of part of the world. The world itself, perhaps, is not something that's rationally grasped. It's not a sort of structured cosmos of an absolute space. The world itself is a horizon to which beings can appear meaningful, salient, and others vanish into kind of oblivion. This oblivion, on the stage in between the oblivion and the void, the abyss, and the conscious entity, lies the entire landscape and structure of the unconscious. So, the idea of the unconscious, especially of the collective unconscious, may only work if the psyche, the self, the kind of deeper sense, deeper ground from which the ego, the conscious self, emerges from, is seen as something that's not just subjective and also not objective, but rather a kind of common being from which the both kind of possibilities of subjectivity and objectivity arise. So one kind of encounter with the world is subject-oriented, the other one is object-oriented, and that is where the sense of inner and outer sphere emerge. So you see kind of a circle denotes automatically an inside of the circle and an outside of the circle, but then there's that which lies beyond. And the archetypes of the unconscious, as they're called, they represent the kind of initial splitting of the world into meaningful entities that are neither inside nor outside, that kind of express themselves in both. When one tries to enter the deep recesses of the unconscious, one will go down layers and layers with further and deeper, more difficult riddles, keys after keys to be found to solve them. But what one will encounter there will be something that lies at the source of all form, at the source of all, you could say, creative nature. And that source, one will quickly realize, is something that cannot be spoken of, as language structures the conscious, the ego. So once one is at that point, one shall remain silent about what one encounters, because down there, what one encounters can only be silenced and not spoken of. As once one speaks of it, it may perish or become a false idol that one clings to, and thus veils the actual path to the source one has been looking for all along. Perhaps this journey, however, is something we all need to go on in order to unlock what truly lies within us.